navy blue of Victoria.
Uses his feet and goes again through mid-wicket. That's an even better shot from the Victorian captain.
Swept away very nicely by Nicole Bolton for four.
Oh, he's been given! That is 50. The man from Northcote.
And welcome to another edition of the Vic State Cricket Podcast. Our guest this week, I'm really excited that he's coming to have a chat because he's got so much to talk about because he's done so many things in cricket. And I speak of current Australian selector and former CEO of Cricket Victoria and Test player, Tony Dodemaide. I don't know really where to start. Tony, welcome.
Thanks, Whitey. Pleasure to be here.
I've got to say, when you walk in here to the City Power Centre where we've got our podcast studio, what's your immediate emotion that comes to the fore?
It's a good question because, probably there was a highlight really and probably the key objective from the time that I first started as CEO coming back here from Perth, or CEO in Perth for 3 years as well. And just to come back here, and it was very clear that the biggest strategic sort of nugget that we needed to solve was to have a home of our own over time. So I was here for 11 years, and it took all of those 11 years to deliver it and get it right. So it's I'm actually moving in here, and I finished not long after actually we moved in here. But it was a bit surreal really, because the job was to get us here, and then basically it was someone else's turn to take over. So I get a bit of an itch of pride that it's here, and it's I think it's probably better than we really expected it to be, and hopefully that's still the case for the people, the players, and the staff that work here now. But it's a sort of a little bit detached as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I would imagine it would be, I don't know, it's almost like when a child leaves home or something like that, in the sense that you've set it up. And I remember you saying it at the time that it's for someone else to now take it forward, that it was your time to depart, and you felt very comfortable with all of that. It was for the next generation or the next brain to be able to then make it go to the next step.
Absolutely, and that's the game in any business. It just rolls on, and I think I was never under any illusions that people would be sorry to see me go and the rest of it. But the fact of the matter is, you leave on Friday and people turn up to work on Monday, and it just rolls on. So there's always something else to do. There's always new things to accomplish. The organisation, the cricket community, the team, they all evolve, and so you only hold the reins for a period of time. And so I never really had any sort of, I don't think when I closed the door behind me that I ever felt a pang of wanting to come back, really, because it was just my time. That was my role. We got us here. I'm really proud of it, but it's time to move on.
It's a spectacular place, and I spend a fair bit of time down here watching cricket, and even when you watch it on television, you can see the city in the background, the Albert Park Lake, and the grassy hill, and the old grandstands are still there. And then this magnificent City Power Centre. Is it? You sort of said it's maybe better than you thought it would be. It is a remarkable place that's become here for Cricket Victoria.
Yeah, I think we envisaged, and you sort of conceptualise something in your mind, but there are always constraints, and I think that as we worked through it, right from the early days when we had the designers, had Graffy, who was, absolutely, if there's anyone that was more passionate about coming here and getting it right than I was, it was Graffy.
Yeah.
And so you're always dealing, though, with constraints of the site, with constraints about what you can and can't build in different parts. And you're thinking, okay, that's the ideal, but we know we're going to be compromised a bit here and there. But actually, having looked around and gone through it as it's finished up, I don't think we compromised all that much, because we still got the nets either side. Probably the stands now have been done. That was always a sort of a missing piece. But the fact we've also got ovals across the road as well, central, so close to the CBD, accessible from all parts of Melbourne. I really think it was absolutely the best we could have hoped for.
And I know there's plans to even upgrade it further down the track. Was it always going to be here? Were there other options that you were looking at for the home of Victorian cricket? Because there's often stories you hear when anything that is new that is built that it could have been here, it could have been there.
Yeah, we could spend the hour on this on this topic just itself, Whitey. But there actually was, because funnily enough, we ended up having 4 proposals. We had at least a dabble, or at least did a feasibility study on four different venues. And in fact, the first time that we went to government and looked at what the options were to do a feasibility study, which they were going to support. The Junction Oval wasn't on the list at all. And the reason that it wasn't is because there just seemed to be too many fingers in the pie in any case, because MCC, Melbourne Cricket Club, had the lease of the place. Melbourne Footy Club were here, used it as their training base. St Kilda, of course, old Melburnians were here as well. So there just seemed like there were so many stakeholders in here that wasn't even on the list. We actually looked at lots of different others. I think there was probably half a dozen other places around Melbourne. But this was inevitably, I think, a problem for the state government because it was dilapidated, because it wasn't going, the future wasn't, it was absolutely a jewel in the crown of Melbourne, this historic, beautiful old site that was just eroding before everyone's eyes. So it didn't have a future plan for it. And when it actually came up and we went to the stakeholders, Melbourne Footy Club were looking somewhere else, they wanted to get out. Melbourne Cricket Club actually were only had the lease here because they needed somewhere to play our games in case we couldn't play at the MCG. Yep. So they weren't enamoured to continue the lease beyond when it was expiring anyway. And so all those, so the waters started to part, if you like. And then we said, well, wait a minute, this has got some real prospects. If we can just continue to put the right plan around it with the local stakeholders, get the government, of course, involved, and it all sort of, it started to focus in more and more. And then, the fact that it was going to be a dedicated cricket facility 24/7, not compromised by having other sort of stakeholders here and other sports that might be here as well. That really started to take shape, and we got the government to believe in it at the time, which is another story. But it all came together, and here we are.
Can you remember the other sites that were thought about?
There were a few. I reckon we looked at certainly Central Reserve in Waverley, because I think that was more or less around the geographic centre of Melbourne in terms of the population base, but clearly a long way from the west. I think there was a site in Tullamarine that we were looking at. What else was there? I think Linton Street, St Kilda, which is now St Kilda, because St Kilda were going.
Yes, yep.
And so that was,
they went to Seaford.
That was a part. You're stretching the memory now, mate. It seems like a long time ago. There was a very brief look at Footscray Park. Because there was another, but that which basically was the floodplain land on the other side of the river to Flemington. So all these had sort of in some parts, but clearly, as there were too many compromises for all those places, and it worked out that this came back on the table. And with the government's endorsement and enthusiasm, because it had a long-term problem for the future use of the site, and so we were the solution. But there was a lot of sort of angst, a lot of twists and turns. It was like a jigsaw puzzle with 1,000 pieces. All the pieces are changing shape every day, and of course, different stakeholders were only interested in these pieces, and then someone else, and it was like a juggle, It was a 10-year juggle, but we finally got there.
And what a place we've got now. It really is remarkable. So we'll go back to the administration side a little bit later on, but I'm interested in who got you loving cricket as a youngster, that got the bug.
Probably mostly on my mother's side. My mum was the youngest of six kids, and she was the only girl, and so 5 uncles, all passionate about footy and cricket. And so whenever Dad played a bit of school footy and cricket, but not to any real degree. But my uncles on my mum's side were really passionate about it. Played lots of local, community cricket, Saturday afternoon cricket there. And so Christmases, test matches in the backyard at Nan's place on Christmas. Going there for Easters or birthday celebrations, just sitting down, cross-legged on the floor with the other cousins, basically just listening to these guys talk about, Keith Miller and Alan Davidson and Richie Benno and Don Bradman, of course. And that sort of thing really inspired that this is, wow, this sounds a really fascinating game, the way they're talking about these people, and wouldn't it be great if someone could talk about me, like this. So it sort of instilled the love there. And then I had, I have two brothers. Of course, we had the sideway, the driveway down the side of the road at Mitchell Street in Footscray, where we grew up, and with crazy paving stones in the middle.
Yep.
So get the ball deviating off those, and lots of fierce test matches happening down the sideway as well. So those sort of early experiences, and the passion was there. Not that you ever think that it's ever going to lead to anything, but you always ask, what if? What if this happened? What if that happened? And keep going, and opportunities open up.
So being an all-rounder, is that partly due to having the brothers and all the cousins, that you had to do both if you wanted to stay involved in family cricket?
Yeah, well, I think so. But I think it's a matter of you want to be involved in every part of the game, and the best way to be involved was that if you got out, of course you'd argue the case that I wasn't out at all, but then you had to give the bat up, and then you got to get the bat back by bowling and getting your brother out. So to stay involved in the game soon worked out that the best chance of being involved in the game at whatever level, even in the mornings when we first started in the under-14s at Footscray United, at Scoville Reserve, that was to be an all-rounder, was to do both. And so yeah, that was pretty easy.
Growing up in Footscray, local cricket club, Footscray United, then on to your district cricket club, or now Premier Cricket Club in Footscray. Footscray was your life. How important was that in your upbringing, not only as a cricketer but as a person?
Footscray, those early days were really important. Growing up in the local community there, playing again in the under-14s in the local association with my brothers. Again, we were sort of three of us were in the starting team of
Fantastic.
the first under-14 team at Footscray United, and then played Hatch Shield at Yarraville, the old Hatch, which is now the Craig Shield.
Yep.
And then ultimately sort of go down. Did well in that, and then Ken Eastwood actually was a pivotal person who's been so influential for me. Who Test cricketer who had come down, played. He'd actually gone to Williamstown, I think, for a year to play subbies, and then come back to Footscray. And he was still, of course, a terrific player, but also, I can remember the day that he came around to Mum and Dad's place in Mitchell Street, and to basically, say that I think Tony should come down and have a go. I was 15 at the time, so I can still remember that. I'll remember that to my dying day. I'm in the kitchen trying to listen down the hallway, and Ken said, "Right, we'll give him a go." So you went down there and played in the thirds and fourths, made my way up, sort of playing local cricket in the morning, and under-16s in the morning, and then whoever was playing home, the thirds or fourths, because you didn't have to drive too far then, in the afternoon. So playing 2 games of cricket every weekend, and eventually, some really important experiences that I had and people at that point in time, which and ultimately, around about the same time as I went down there, Merv was coming down. I think he was 17 when he was first coming down, and when he first came down, I was 15. And so the old joke is that basically I grew up and he didn't.
That's right. I want to talk to you about Merv in a minute. So, were you always, and this might sound a bit controversial, but were you always better than your brothers, or were they? Why is it that you got the talent maybe that your brothers didn't have, or was it an opportunity thing? How did it evolve?
No, I always thought my older brother Warren was more talented than me. He was only 14 months older, but he was much more physically mature. He was strong, and there's early games we'd play in the morning, and he had this beautiful cut shot, and he used to bowl these sort of in-swingers, and I always wanted to beat him. Of course, you want to beat your older brother at everything, don't you?
Yeah.
And so he was more. My poor younger brother, who was a couple of years behind us, I guess he was always fighting. He was always fighting to get in the mix as well. But no, I wasn't super talented at all. I think I always had limitations as a player, even in those days. But I think I recognised that probably early, and just wanted to make up for it by endeavour. I soon worked out. Well, I had a great mentor actually from the Footscray days. Went to the under-19s, the tour. I had 3 years in the national under-19s for Victoria. The last year was a trip to England, and I was actually made it by 4 days.
Right.
Because the cut-off time my birthday's 5th of October.
Yep.
The cut-off time for the under-19s was the 1st of October, start of the cricket season. So I got in by 4 days in this last year, which happened to be a tour of England. So that was a real sort of, you talk about the outlier moments when, just luck happens. So thanks, Mum, for having me on the 5th of October, which snuck into that last game. But just as I was going to leave, so I was building up to that, finished the season before at Footscray playing in, and a guy by the name of Peter Dredge, who was a very fine fast bowler in Premier Cricket for Footscray. He was a phys ed teacher at a local high school. And he said to me at the end of the season, well, you going on the trip? I said, yeah, when are you going? Oh, July. He said, well, what are you doing in the meantime? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're going to go on a cricket trip, you're going to play cricket solid for 7 weeks. What preparation are you going to do? I said, oh, I don't know. He said, well, maybe you should think about it and, maybe why don't you come down after school 2 nights a week, meet me at the high school and then we'll do some fitness stuff.
Right.
And I absolutely, so I credit him with actually teaching me about how important physical preparation was. And it actually was, because I got on the trip, we had a great side in that, Craig McDermott, Ian Healy, Mike Valletta, they were all on that trip. And I actually pulled my groin in the first couple of games over there and managed to play through it.
Right.
But I don't think if I was as fit enough, and that always sort of reinforced to me that fitness is so crucial. Talent-wise, if there's so many things in the game you can't control, so control the ones you can, and one you can is your own physical preparation and fitness. So I always made it a mark of mine to be the fittest bloke in whatever team I played in, because I could bowl longer. So when it got down to, which it often does in sport, a war of attrition, ultimately who's going to give up first? And it wasn't going to be me, because I was going to be the one that would just keep as relentless as possible, and get them out because they were bored, whatever. I don't care, but at least that's how that I think was more my value than talent. I wasn't particularly talented.
I think you were, but I also understand what you're saying, and it probably set up the fact you end up playing 184 first-class games over a long period of time, which we'll get to. So multiple years of under-19 representation, and then you said playing with some and against some really talented young players. Was there a moment where you thought, this could actually be a career for me? Was there often I've asked other guests, is there a moment or a game where you go, oh, okay, this could work out pretty well for me?
I can't remember any specific game. There was always a hope, so coming back from the 19s, this might be it, get invited to the state squad. Ian Redpath was coaching the first year there. And I think the prevailing view, because there was no contracts, which is another thing, I think, in my career, which I reckon it spanned from sort of the real sort of amateur, professional preparation, but amateur really in terms of organisation and money, versus contracts, coming into contracts. But the prevailing view, and the first thing you were ever told when you got to the state squad, was treat every game like it's your last, because one of these days it will be.
Yep.
And so there was no real, I had 14 years of a professional career, but I didn't have 14 years. I had 14 one-year careers.
Yeah. Yep.
Because every year might have been the last. The only time that I actually felt any sort of security was playing for Sussex, where I actually got a 2-year deal to go and play for Sussex, and I'm actually going to get paid whether I played or not, for 2 years.
Yep.
And I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it started off as only match payments. The only time you got paid was when you were picked in the 12.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so everything else was just up in the air. So it wasn't, I talk about it now, and I don't begrudge that time. I'm really pleased at the time I played. But I was also involved in the ACA at the time when we set up. I was on the executive of the ACA when the first MOU was done. And I think that was a really important time. That was a really important milestone in the game as well. So there was now security, so guys could actually dedicate themselves to the game in balance, because I'm also a big believer in having some interest outside of the game as well, because when you finish, it's a long time left.
It just shows we could talk for hours about all those sorts of things. The Merv Hughes connection, you talked about it before, and Merv has come in and had a chat to us, and he talked so glowingly of you. Can you remember when you first met?
I do recall, and this will probably, I love getting him on this because because he ignored me for the first few years, because of course he was at the old grade cricketer stuff. You know, if you're in the seconds, you don't talk to anyone in the thirds or the fourths because, you know, they're way beneath you. So it was, while I was at the club, I wasn't actually part of that set, if you like, because he was always a little bit ahead of me. He never invited me to his 21st, by the way, because he still thought I was a kicker then, which he was probably right. But you can edit that out if you like. But so he was always a little bit above me. Excuse me. Where we really established a connection was on that tour of England. So in the 1983, I was touring England with the Aussie under-19s, and Merv was on an SO scholarship. So it used to be, which I eventually was on for Sussex a couple of years later. But the SO scholarships, you got placed at a county club, playing mostly seconds, and for 3 months. And so the last match of our tour on the 19s was at Chelmsford, Essex, where Merv was based. And so Merv thought it was great that this other guy from Footscray was in England at the same time at the same place. So it's a long story. We embellish it a little bit, but we sat down, end of the game. He said, "You're not going back, so come and sit with me at the bar just outside the ground, a pub," and we just had a few drinks. And anyway, we ended up. I think that's where we really became good friends. And then, of course, when I got back, I was in the state squad. He was already there. He'd already played. So the two Footscray boys were sort of, they called Franco and Kotso or something. So anyway, we're with the two, or the Eastwood brothers, I think, because Eastie got him down there as well at Footscray. So that's where we probably first really struck up a good friendship, and we became pretty thick mates ever since. And we're still that way now. I still consider him one of my closest friends. I'm sort of joint godfather to his 3 kids. He's godfather to one of mine. I can't get rid of him, really. So I've changed my number. I've changed address a few times. He keeps tracking me down.
So you're incredibly loyal to each other, and said Merv will always talk so highly of you, and vice versa. But you're so different as people. How have you been able to be friends for as long as you have? Where's the magic in the friendship?
I'm very tolerant, I think. No, I mean, you're right. It doesn't make sense, does it? I mean, he thought it was great that, so he left at year 11, worked in a sports store and wanted to play football and cricket. And I've got a degree in, applied sciences, and which he thought was hilarious because we're playing cricket. We couldn't really so we're both working in a stationery warehouse of one of his mates. And he looked around and he said, "Oh, well, how many years do you spend at school?" 5 or 6. Well, what good did it do you? Here we are. We're both packing the same bloody boxes. But I just think we gelled, and I love him as a bloke. I love his loyalty to his friends, because it's not only me, but Snapper and Burnsy and all the guys he grew up with, and Rainer Reba, all the guys he grew up with in Werribee are still his mates now. He never lost that. And I think we're also important for each other as we're going through, because it was really tough. He was a lot more successful than I was at the international level. But, you need mates, you need friends. When the support network probably isn't anywhere near as elaborate as it is now, you need your teammates and you need people that you can trust. And we've had some pretty important times together too, where we've helped each other through times where, you don't think you're going to play again, or you're injured or you've been dropped, and you just think the world's about to end, and then knock at the door and there's Merv, with a few beers, and we're going to sit down, we're going to talk. So those are the things that I think are really important, and I hope it's still the case. I hope that I hope there's still that bond and that camaraderie between players now, even though the support network, thank God, is a lot better than what it was.
I think with Merv, a lot of people think of him as the happy-go-lucky sort of guy who played cricket with heart on his sleeve and all that sort of thing. But it's probably the thing that stands out to me is just his honesty. We talk about loyalty, but his honesty and his care for people that he works with, whether that be on the cricket field, whether it be doing commentary, whatever it is. He's incredibly loyal and passionate for the people he's working with. That helps create a team. So you can kind of then see why he was so popular in the Test team with those sorts of qualities.
And he just thrives on that group mentality. If there's anyone that I don't think I've ever seen anyone that loves the dressing room as much as Merv does. And he was a complete pest. and still is. What AB called him fruit fly, Australia's greatest pest. So but he thrived. He just off the energy, of the people around him, and he loved the contest. And I've seen him. I saw him play through some horrendous pain. I've never seen anyone that played with as much pain. He had stress fractures in his back every year by Christmas, and he just kept playing. So because those days you never give up your place in the team. So he just kept taking painkillers and right, I'll get to the end of the season because then I'll have a few months off and then hopefully be right next year. And his action will change a little bit and it'll alleviate. But he played with some incredible duress, which again endeared him so much to the people around him. It's why AB talks about him now. That Merv was one of the first he'd pick because when things got tough, give the ball to Merv.
Yeah. Must be the Footscray thing because you've got the similar sort of philosophy on it all. So you've told me before that you don't have a great memory. It seems to be going okay at the moment. I want to know when you first found out that you were going to play for Victoria.
I was at home. How was it, 20? I think I just turned 20, I think, my first game. You're right. You have jogged my memory a bit. I was at home, no mobile phones, obviously. So there was a call in the kitchen at home, and a guy by the name of Doug Ackley. You may know Doug Ackley. So Doug was a journo. He was sort of bit of freelancing, did a bit here and there. And I'd met Doug through Brendan McCardle, through Bushy and a couple of other people, and he rang. He said, "Oh, Tony, it's Doug here." I said, "Oh, Doug, what's up?" He said, "Well, congratulations." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, you've been named in the Shield team." I said, "Have I?" So there was not. Talk about the selector's role now. One of the important pieces of communication about actually hearing it directly from. And not in that time. You either heard from the journos or read it in the paper. So I found out I was playing my first game through Doug Ackley. Wow. And we were going to. So I was picked in a squad to go to Adelaide. So to play first limited overs, what they call it then, McDonald's Cup, I think it was in Adelaide. So I played the first game there, and also coincidentally played my first Shield game in Adelaide as well. So I was 20. I think just turned 20.
So when you find out from a journalist that you're going to be making your debut for Victoria, what's the first thing you then do? Is it tell your parents, or is it ring the captain of Victoria, ring the coach of Victoria and say, is this actually happening, or did you wait till training? What?
I sort of said, my mum was home at the time or whatever. I think I'm playing for Victoria this trip. But they could be taking the piss. Someone could be having a lend to me here. But I'll go to training and then so there was no other backup. It's just sort of, or wait for the paper to come out and see if my name's in the paper. But I think at that time, professionalism, we only trained one night a week for Victoria in that time because you trained with your club Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then state training was Wednesday nights at the Albert ground, and so you far be it from state cricket to interrupt district cricket at the time. But I'll go to training and I'll see if it's all legit. But then a letter came. You also got a letter. Every Shield game, we got a letter, a handwritten, a typed out letter signed by Ken Jacobs. We invite you to play for Victoria in the forthcoming match against blah blah blah. You'll be paid the princely sum of $200, and so you got letters for every single game. It was a formal invitation to play.
Right, that's incredible. So South Australia it was that you made your debut. Who were the sort of players that you were playing with in those first couple of matches, and probably some of the big names that were a bit intimidating to have in the dressing room with you? Oh yeah, for sure. So guys, so it was sort of at that juncture between where the older Victorian, there's a bit of turnover coming in the Victorian team. So Max Walker had just finished, so Merv basically came in for Max. And there was still, so we had veterans in the team. Spotty was captain, Ray Bright, Dasher Hibbert was in the team. Julian Weiner was still in the team at that stage. It was Davy Watmore. Yep. Graham Yallop, when he wasn't on national duty, was in that team as well. So yeah, pretty intimidating for a young bloke. And I think in that time as well, culturally, it was a long way from where it is now. So coming in as a young bloke and
the thing was, you were going to get tested. You were going to get sledged. You were going to get humiliated. You were going to get bullied. All the rest of it. And then you went out of your own dressing room and played the opposition. So it was like a culture to say, well, let's see if he's hard enough, because he's going to really, first class cricket's a hard place. It's a hard place to be. So let's see if he's got the mettle to see through this. And guys that don't, bang, they're never going to make it anyway. So put them off and let's try someone else. So it was quite cutthroat. It was quite cutthroat in that respect. So everyone was really trying to protect their own positions, but also, if you like, trying to gel as a team on occasions. And it was really because I'd come from Footscray, where basically, you're playing with your mates and everyone jumps in, together and help each other. And all. Yeah, of course you want to succeed, but you're there as a team. And so this dynamic for a 20-year-old was Rod McCurdy, I think, was also playing at that stage as well. So that was a bit of a that was certainly an experience to try and work through.
So when you look back on that now, and then that is 40 years ago, and you've gone on to be CEO of two cricket states, national selector, you've been incredibly successful in business for a long period of time as well. That sort of culture, do you look back on that and not be embarrassed but uncomfortable that it was like that for a 20-year-old? Or is it more that was the time and that's just how it was?
Absolutely. There was a time that was just the way it was played. That was Australian cricket at the time. And so you can, as a 20-year-old, you can say, well, this is not fair. Okay, you're one of the ones that can just go back and play weekend cricket.
Yep.
Actually, it's a funny thing in my first Shield game, because David Hooks was captain of South Australia, and I think Mike Coward was at the game. We used to have reporters at the game reporting on all the games there, and Mike Coward had this sort of interview. So I'd done reasonably well in the first game, and so they come in and sort of, what's this young bloke? Let's talk to him. He said, I noticed out there in between overs, David Hooks was talking to you. So what was he saying? What was he saying? And the reality was, Hooksy was absolutely sledging the Christ out of me. Every oath under the sun, going down there. And I think I was batting with Ray Bright at the time. And so we're walking down the pitch, Hooksy's alongside me. And I've got a big smile on my face. And Spotty's coming up from the other end. He's looking at me, he's going, because you can hear what Hooksy's all about. And he said, why are you grinning? Why are you smiling? He said, oh, geez, this is all right. I thought it was going to be different to district cricket. This is just like playing at the Western Oval. and so that was also what you had to get through in district cricket as well. So it actually, in a perverse way, it sort of relaxed me that, I thought this was all really special, but this is exactly the same as district cricket. So I'm right. I'm okay.
That's hilarious.
But it was a time. It was a time which is well gone, and thank God for that, because it was rubbish. It was all bullshit, of course. But it actually then, some players did. The thing was, try and distract, try and intimidate, try and put off the game, whatever it takes for them to fail, which again was the time.
It is interesting. It's another discussion in itself around building resilience, I guess, and building hard-nosed athletes versus, potentially criticisms of some of the athletes of today. But you can't imagine it being like that today, like it was. It's just,
And thank God for that.
Yeah, I think so
Thank God
too.
for that,
I think
it
so
was
too.
Rubbish. It was absolute rubbish, and there was racism. There was anything. But basically, it was the time.
Yeah.
The 70s and 80s were pretty. It was a bit of a free for all.
Yeah.
And that was reflected in the team. So it was a horrible culture, as we now know, and thank God that we've moved past all that. But if you were going to survive at the time, that's what you had to live with.
So 1983, as you said, you made your debut for Victoria, and it ended up you played for Victoria. It's still hard to come to terms with the fact that 16 years you played for Victoria.
Good God, yeah.
It is remarkable that length of time, and a lot of one-day cricket, 105 Shield matches, and an amazing record. When did you feel that you not had made it as a state player, but you felt comfortable enough? You mentioned before it was sort of like year to year to year, but where did you feel like you were a first-class cricketer?
I can't remember feeling particularly comfortable. because the lesson too was when you feel when you think you've sorted it out,
Yep.
that's when the game bites you on the arse. And I had a couple of jolts. I mean, my career went this and that way. Probably the best was a couple of years because I came into the team and played under 19s, bowling in swingers and leg cutters, and batting a bit.
So sort of that number 7-8.
No, number seven,
role?
number 7-8, but basically big windy action, bowling in swingers and leg cutters, and which was okay. I mean, it was again results not great. And we had a Shield game, the Shield final in 86-87. We went to Perth. Mike Belletta, who's a great mate of mine, keeps reminding me of it because he got 267 in that game. It was like a Hume Highway. It was an absolute road, as they were in Shield finals. But Redder's, anyway, I'll truncate the story, but Redder's great mates with Graham McKenzie. And Garth, he got him to come down to the game and sat in the back of the box. Dino was out there. I think we got 400 in the first innings, set it up, which was nowhere near enough as the game turned out. But he invited Garth to come down, talk to me. And and Garth, lovely man, beautiful man, Garth McKenzie, and just I hadn't seen him play, but I knew his stats and knew his record. What an amazing bowler. And basically on the lines of, okay, what do you want to achieve in the game? Okay, do you want to play at international level? Well, is that a trick question? Of course I want to play at international. Well, how do you think you're going to get there? Okay, by taking wickets. Well, what sort of wickets? Tail enders, or good players. And some probably good players. I say, okay, well, how do good players get out? How are you going to get more good players out? So, what do you mean? Well, how do good players, predominantly right-handers at that point in time. So you're bowling in swingers. Do good players get out LBW and bowled? So not too often. How do they get out? Well, probably caught behind the wicket. So okay, well, what do you need to do to? So it was getting me to the stage to say, well, do you think that is going to get you there? This in swinging and leg cutter. So he brought his kid along and he says, well, you want to try to develop an outswinger? So he brought his kid along, his whites, and he was 40 odd, I think, early 40s at the time, and we went out to the back of the nets at the Wacker.
This is during the Shield final.
During the Shield final, and there was actually in those days the TV stations used to send reported teams over for the Shield final, and there was a young bloke there from Channel 10 who was on the had the guy who was the reporter. His name was Eddie Maguire, by the way, and I said, mate, can you actually, you've got the cameraman there, can you come out the back and just film some of this? So he said, yeah, no worries. He thought it was great, McKenzie. So Garth McKenzie's in there, and we were in the nets for about 45 minutes, and he filmed. I got him to film McKenzie as he was coming up from the start of the right ball throughs, and I had this tape. He gave me this VHS tape, and I've tried to find it. I reckon I've still got it somewhere. But it was basically Garth bowling. And this is bowling these beautiful outswingers. And I thought, Christ, well, okay, well, I'm gonna try that, bugger it. I might stuff up my whole thing, but yeah, I'm going to give it a shot. So I took it home and I wore this thing out. And I bowled down at the local park and in the indoor nets and whatever, and came back the next season bowling outswing.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and I was did all right in the first few games. Got picked in the PM's 11, and then there was an injury. So Merv was, and that was 86, 87. So, Christmas 87. And I was in the test squad by Christmas. However, and that's, Merv famously, weak as he is, soft. It's always been a bit soft, Merv. But he did a hamstring just on the morning of the match. I wasn't supposed to play. So
you weren't supposed to play Boxing Day?
No. I was just there as injury cover.
Yeah.
So myself and Mike Whitney were there as injury cover for Merv and Bruce Reid. Bruce didn't even get on the plane because he was famously, injured quite a bit. But I wasn't supposed to play even the night before the game. And Merv, so we were at the team meeting, which was around the Hilton Hotel pool bar with a couple of beers. That was a team meeting the night before the game, and basically it was going to be, Dodd, thanks for coming down, but Merv's going to be all right. Why don't you come down in the morning though, and train with us and spend the day with us? And I thought it was Christmas. It actually was. It was the 25th of December. So I went down the following morning. just basically first out in the nets because I was just going to help everyone warm up. Who wouldn't want to be around him? And basically, just as AB and Jeff Crow were coming out to toss the coin, I was literally still bowling. Got a tap on the shoulder, turned around and say, B. He said, Merv's not going to make it, you're in. Good luck. Turned around and walked off. And that was 20 minutes before the game started. So that was my introduction to Test cricket.
So one of the most famous, I think it's still one of the most famous Test matches ever played in Australia, let alone at the MCG, where Mike Whitney and Craig McDermott hold on for a famous draw. And a young
which never thanked me for that, actually. I made Whit famous for that.
Why is that?
Because I got out to let him go in and take all the glory to bat out the last half a dozen overs and make a hero.
So it's against New Zealand, as I said. Whitney and McDermott bat out that end, and it's so many people watch that dramatic ending, but it kind of overshadows the fact that you make your debut, 5-wicket haul and a 50 on debut for Australia at the MCG in front of your home crowd. As you said, you find out 20 minutes before that you're about to play. Do you think so? Do you think if it wasn't you on standby, do you reckon Merv would have potentially pushed through and played? Because I mean, that's the incredible irony of all this is two mates growing up together. We've talked about Merv that he actually makes way for you to play for Australia.
It is a wild coincidence, isn't it? No, look, I think he was. Maybe it might have just softened it a little bit for him, but I can't imagine him, given up. But then again, he got a tweak in his hamstring, and it was going to be Errol Alcott, Hooter, is a very famous physio, and he said, mate, I don't think it's going to hold out, and so. But maybe you're right. I haven't actually directly asked him the question. I'm sure he just didn't give up his place willingly, but it may have softened the blow for him, the fact that his mate and the Footscray boy was going to get a chance.
And what about from your point of view, actually not knowing until so close to the game? It was 6 for 58 you took in the first innings, and it's still known as one of the great debut performances of all time, but that you didn't have that night before or the 2 days before to think about it, that you could just go out there and do your thing. I know a test match is played out over 5 days, but do you think that might have helped you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it did, genuinely, because, I turned up with no expectation at all. Just the fact that being in the inner sanctum for the test match was great. And it was almost like it happened. It was almost 2-3 minutes, it seemed like, from getting the news, as I said, going and changing my pants because I shit myself. But literally, I didn't have any kit. So I actually I've only before this podcast had a coffee with a guy called Ron Steiner, who is well known to a lot of people around the sporting traps here, who's a great mate and mentor of mine ever since. But he was actually working for the ACB on that day and had to sprint across the road from the MCG to go down into the storeroom, get a baggy green and get a couple of shirts and come back and give them to me just as I was going out onto the ground. And that was my cap presentation. So Ron Steiner, thank you for my cap presentation all those years ago.
That's amazing.
But it was almost no time to get nervous. Because literally had to go in, get changed, call mum from the rooms out and say, sorry mum, I can't come on the family holiday up to Dalesford, for Christmas. I've actually got to play for Australia today. And so organise a couple of tickets for mum and dad to come in, and then bang, next thing I know, I'm fielding at mid-on. Craig, who I'd played with in under-19s, and Mike Whitney opening the bowling, and there I am, fielding in a test match. So the way it did, so I think there was that sort of freedom. There was a bit of a freedom, but it was, and you're right, it's an outstanding game of cricket. I was playing against my idol, Richard Hadley. For years I'd sat at home with the old VHS and actually physically taped his spells whenever it was on the TV, because I loved the way he used the crease, the way he changed his pace, and I just thought he was the ultimate professional. And here I was, I've got to play him. So to get so it's a very happy memory.
You got Alan Bordery's 100th catch with a legitimate nick to it, an out swinger.
Martin Crowe, the late great Martin Crowe.
Yeah, absolutely. There were some terrific names in that New Zealand team. It was a draw in the end, but it felt like a victory, and it felt like a famous result in a lot of ways that may have helped define the next generation of Australian cricket?
It was a pivotal time. We hadn't actually won a series
yeah.
then, and that last day, so they were 9 down overnight, day 4, and day 5, I took the first, which was my 6th wicket in the first over of the day. And I think we needed 240 to win the Test match in a whole day. But we hadn't won a series. Australia hadn't won a series, and it was just like, okay, we're 1-0 up in this series, so. Okay, let's see how we are. Let's bat through, see how we are. But everyone's very conscious that Australia hasn't won a series for quite a while. So to look like, and it was one of those days where we get a few runs and lose a wicket or two, and then it always seemed to be in the balance. And it got down to the end, and I got 50 in the first innings, but coming out, and I was palpably LBW to Richard Hadley for 3 in the second innings. And then just felt sick as I'm walking off the ground because I've got to pass Witt. He was a great mate. I love Witt. And then he's got the hits out and he's charging onto the ground. He's up for the challenge, and I just felt sick because I thought I'd let him down. I'd let Australia down in my first game, and famously he survives that last over from Richard. It was about half a dozen overs. I think he and Craig batted out, but it was a great game of cricket to play and take away the personal stuff. But and I think it's one of the best Test matches, you're right.
Yeah, I agree. So then your one-day international debut, you also took 5 wickets, or had a 5-wicket haul. 6 in the Test match, 5 for one-day cricket. Do you think you were that was against Sri Lanka in Perth, do you think you were a better one-day bowler or a Test bowler, a red ball bowler versus a white ball bowler?
There wasn't that much of a distinction in those days.
No, it's a very similar team, wasn't it?
Yeah, it almost was. So I wasn't in the one-day squad at that stage. So I played obviously the Test match, and literally just at the end, towards the end of the game, they were picking the one-day team. And because I'd done all right in the Test match, you better come to Perth then to play the one-days as well. So, okay. And those are the days when they were chopping and changing between the Test and the one-days. You often sort of played a couple of one-days and a Test and a few more one-days or whatever the case may be. So the transitioning didn't. And it sort of that time rewarded Test match bowling anyway. So I think open the bowling there and you could bowl 7 or 8, 1 for 30 in your first spell, or even bowl through your 10, all up front. And 1 for 50 was in the first 15 overs was a good score because you had a good foundation.
Yeah,
for the rest
that's right.
Of the match.
That's it.
Yeah. And I finished up, and Mark Greatbatch was running at me from the other end. I thought, things are changing here. So that was that was sort of happened again unexpectedly, and all of a sudden I'm there in Perth. We'd won the series, so big celebration afterwards, and so things fell. I mean, is one of those stretches where everything seems to probably go right. And I got 5 for it, but I wasn't man of the match for that one because I got the last 2 wickets at the end, which won us the game. We were winning easily anyway. Steve Waugh got 3 for and 30 odd, and that was enough. But it's a bit of a trivia thing as well because I think it still holds the case that I think myself and Fidel Edwards are the only 2 in international cricket to get a 5 for on both Test and one-day debut. So I think that's still the case, but that's another trivia thing. My cricket career is a succession of trivia questions.
I was going to say, that's a very good trivia question. I might remember that one. So when you look back on your international career, 10 Test matches, 24 one-day internationals. Before I ask I was going to ask you, do you see yourself as an all-rounder? Do you see yourself as a bowler who batted well? Sort of like a Pat Cummins sort of number 8. How would you define yourself as a cricketer?
You're not going to pull me into that one. I'm not going to compare myself to Paddy.
But more that number 8.
I know this is going out on social, so that's not going to happen.
But how would you define yourself as a cricketer?
I think I was a genuine all-rounder at club level. So I batted probably 3, 4, 5 sort of top high middle order in sort of Premier cricket. I was an okay all-rounder at first class. I think I finished up with sort of 500s and 2750s or something at first class level, which was okay. So in other words, the further I went up, I think I was certainly at international level. I was more a bowling all-rounder, a useful batter, semi-useful batter that was primarily there for bowling.
I'm thinking Will Sutherland. Very similar role to what Will plays for Victoria and hopefully one day for Australia. So the question I was going to ask you is, do you think that, I'm trying to work out why he didn't play more for Australia, and I'm thinking Simon O'Donnell, I'm thinking Mark Waugh, Steve Waugh, they sort of all-rounders at the time. Did that make it harder for you to play more? Because your record would suggest, a batting average of 22, a bowling average of 28 at Test level. Well, my question is, why didn't you play more?
Yeah, look, I think there's two sides of that coin. One of which you look at a record and say could have played more. I think the other side of the coin is Merv's fit, and I never play at all.
Yeah, fair. Yep.
So I might never have got that shot if Merv's hamstring hadn't have tweaked on him that morning. Mm-hmm. You're right. There was a terrific lot of players that were coming through at that stage. Lots of competition for bowling spots. In some ways, that was lucky, I had a great start, but I was always realistic about the game. Never got carried away that was always going to be what it was going to be like. As I said before, I only started bowling. I'd only just started bowling outswing at that time, which is great because it really clicked for that first little bit. But because I hadn't bowled that for a long time, I hadn't bowled that. That wasn't my game before then. I had technical problems not long after that, so I got through that summer and had a good summer. In tests and one days. And then we went to Pakistan. So I was picked on the Pakistan trip. Very flat wickets, dead wickets. And I wasn't swinging the ball. I'd actually technically, I was more pushing the ball into the stumps. So I lost my outswinger. And for a guy my pace, that was not going to be good by any stretch. And so we got back to Australia, first two tests after coming from the flat dumps at Pakistan. And we're playing the West Indies in Brisbane and Perth. And, my outswinger was, if it was there, was gentle outswing. It'd swing from the hand. It didn't have that snap late swing that I had the year before. And so I had technical issues, and I was out of the team again by Christmas. So I played the first two tests. And then some sort of obscure bloke by the name of Terry Alderman was fit again.
Yeah.
Again, that was another thing. If Terry hadn't done his shoulder, and he was a regular part in the Australian team. And I idolised Terry as well, who was a terrific bloke as well as a magnificent bowler. And he was available again. He was back playing, and so I was battling. So bang, and I had no complaints. By the way, if you're going to get rolled by Terry Alderman, I've got no complaints about that. And it took me a lot. I didn't get back in the team for 4 years, but I guess I made it I got an opportunity to play county cricket after that. And I really decided, I actually got back in the team briefly 4 years later. And I actually am prouder of getting back into the team and going through than I was actually playing in the first place, because playing in the first place might have been a bit of luck, that things clicked and just happened to be in good form at the right time. I really had to earn that second chance to get back. And I'm prouder of that, to spend 4 years of a goal. I was quite obsessed about it, really, about getting back in the Australian team. And so to do that was great, albeit that I was 28, 29 at that stage, and that probably, in those days that was probably where they'd look to the Flemings and the Rifles and those sort of guys who were coming through.
But in credit to you as well, when you did get back, the team was a lot stronger than what it was when you first got in the team as well.
Yeah, it was. They were going through a good time. Merv was still there, which was great, and Boone, Marsh. Jones. I got a wicket with my first ball in Test cricket coming back. It was in Sri Lanka. So I got picked on the Sri Lanka tour. I was Shield Player of the Year the previous year. And so, I got on the plane to Sri Lanka, played a couple of tests there. It was my last two tests, actually. So my last test, 4 for 67, I think were my figures, and I never played again. So.
And that was a series that Shane Warne played too.
Warney was there on his first trip. We roomed together.
Yeah.
We roomed together, actually, because just Warney and I, he was coming through, obviously, and everyone could see he was going to be an outrageous talent. But we roomed together on that trip, so I got to know him quite well.
Did you think that a lot of people have had formed a view on Shane Warne by then that he was going to be the next big thing. You would have known him a little bit better than a lot of the others for obvious reasons with the Victorian connection. Did you think he was going to be what he became?
I don't think anyone could have realistically projected that of what outrageous things he was going to do. the only other funny story I recall was Hoggy, who's Rodney Hogg, very, very funny man, and Hoggy actually he wrote an article in what was the Truth in that time, the rag, the old Truth rag there, and he wrote in there that this kid Shane Warne was going to get 500 Test wickets, and they sacked him for writing shit, and he actually got 700. The Truth. How could you get sacked from the Truth for writing crap? So no. Clearly, it was just a phenomenal talent. You could hear the fizz coming out of the hand, and just thought, wow. But leg spin was like ancient.
Yeah, that's
those
right.
days. It wasn't sexy at all.
No.
He made it sexy again.
Yeah.
But leg spinners were nowhere to be seen. I mean, I think our coach at the time, Les Stillman, I think he said at one stage, "Oh no, the game's gone past leg spin. Leg spin's done famous anymore." Oh, really? Okay. And of course, he just changed the world.
So through your time, as I said, 16 years playing for Victoria, you did win a Shield title. But when I think back to that period of time where you played for Victoria and played for Australia, there wasn't a lot of people that played for Australia that were Victorian. The ones that stand out are Merv Hughes, Dean Jones, yourself. Probably there was a couple of others that may have come and went pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's a couple.
But generally,
Wayne Phillips played one Test famously.
But generally speaking, there wasn't a lot of.
Yeah.
So I grew up in that time, so I was a kid during that time. So Dean Jones was just everything to me because he was the one that was the Victorian that batted in the top six, and Merv Hughes was the bowler. You were the all-rounder. That was my childhood growing up. But why wasn't there more that played for Australia, do you think? Or is it just a cycle?
Yeah, I think we predominantly, besides Dino, we predominantly produced bowlers in that time and I've tried to I tried to analyse that years later, and I think there was a bit of a clue in that why I was called up that time at the MCG was Alan Davidson. I think was one of the selectors at the time, and they thought that someone who'd bowled on, because it was a pretty dead wicket in those days. It was quite flat and dead, and so if you played in Perth and you got the ball to bounce and swing and whatever, that was fine. But actually playing on those dead wickets was something that you had to be pretty skillful in order to do that. So maybe at the time the wickets and the bowling was sort of over-indexed, if you like, because of what we played on every second game. We did have talented players, but I don't, and particularly in the role I'm in now, I don't subscribe to one state getting more favoured than another. You pick the best players, and the fact of the matter is that we had the guys at the time. It's pretty hard to crack into that team, because I mean it was an incredible batting lineup in particular, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Dino definitely, 50 odd tests and led the way, and his one-day cricket was amazing as well. But I don't know that too many. Probably Jamie Siddons was one player, and I love Jamie. He was the heart and soul of the team when we were all young coming through together before he went to South Australia. And I'm proud to say that I played in his one and only game for Australia, which was in Karachi. He was on the Pakistan tour and got sick. There was not much of Jamie anyway to lose, but he lost half his body weight, I think, and he played one-day international. I think he was an amazing talent, but he was probably the most unlucky, I think, in that time not to play more.
I think it was generally felt at the time, and even years past, that he was maybe the best player not to play Test cricket. I mean, there's always those stories through the time, but he was one that was awfully close for a long time. He was,
and his first class record was fantastic. His catching, fielding was amazing as well. I think from memory, because he was a real offside player, because by nature he would go inside out and was very strong, sort of down the ground and to point basically, and in that area, but not so much in here. And I think that Simo at the time, Bob Simpson, who was coach and probably drove the selection as well, just felt that he needed a more rounded game in order to succeed at the international level. And that's judgment calls you make at some time. And then you've got the War brothers, you've got Damien Martin, you've got these other guys that are pretty good talents as well.
A complicated question. I'm mindful of time, but going on to when you were CEO of Cricket Victoria, did you feel that, I mean, there's that balance between trying to produce Australian players and trying to win things. And during your time as CEO, you used to win a lot. There's a lot of titles and a lot of successful, it was a successful era. How is that? And what role does a CEO have in that balance of trying to produce the next Australian player versus trying to win things?
I remember coming back to Victoria and being, I was the WACA CEO at the time, but was very keen to come home. And one of the pitches was that I think we'd really underachieved for a long period of time in Victorian cricket, and I think we also had some great talent in the team. And you're right, that era was a very successful one on the field. And I think as a CEO, so it's always a balance, I think, between winning competitions, because the old prevailing view was that if you're successful, your players will get picked anyway, because success breeds successful teams, and good players go up. Not necessarily the case when there was so much separation between international and state cricket. I think some of the other things that we were criticised for at the time was that you can have a group of players that aren't up to that level, but if they play consistently enough and gel well enough, you can have success at that level without anyone really jumping out to be up there. So what does success look like? I think as a CEO and board, you've got to be really defined as to what success looks like, and then how do you motivate behaviours and programs and all the rest of it. That's what you can do. I stayed away from the cricket side largely, left Graffy to it.
Was that hard, considering you'd played at the highest level?
No, not particularly. I intervened probably a couple of times when I just thought, but Graffy and I got on really well, and basically we'd always have jousts about what was going on, but I was very conscious of trying to keep the top office and the board away from the playing group, because if there's one thing that you put people in place, you put the terms around how you're going to judge their performance, and then leave them to it. Because if you don't trust that, well, you should have employed them in the first place. So then it was around what does success look like, and we decided with the board that it was about Australian players as well. Probably let's lean more towards production of Australian players, and what we don't want is number of Australian players, because then the success will be having 20 players that play one game each. We don't want that, of course. We want consistent players playing consistently for the country. And so then it became about, okay, how many places in the team, how many players and places in the team do Victorian players fill, men and women, in that, as opposed to winning success or successful performance on Grand Shields and whatnot as well. So I think that's what we drove in terms of the incentives and the contracts that we had in place for the coaching staff and people in high performance, and that's how you do it. That's how you drive it, because I think trying to jump over someone and trying to have your own fingerprints on it just doesn't work.
So pretty much 25 years, let's say 25 years as a player or administrator within Cricket Victoria. Who would be the best player, do you think, you saw in that time?
The best for
Victoria, yeah.
Yeah, I always go. There's two names always stick out, which is Dean Jones and Shane Warne. I was lucky enough to play with both of them, both big personalities. But Dino was a genius in terms of he had to put up a lot. Had to put up with a lot for Dino, because I knew him well, and we were mates. But that when there was a challenge there, that he would go out and just do it, and he did it time and time and time again. Loved playing for Victoria, as of course did Warnie. So different players in the respect, and I've got to have Merv in the conversation again, because just you would want Merv in your team as first picked every time.
And it felt like the three of them.
Oh, I've talked about the playing side. Clearly, when I was administrator, with the wave of players coming through, you got your Hodges, you got Peter Siddle, just amazing players that are in the conversation. Of course. Of the best Victorian players, for sure.
It felt that the three names you mentioned, which were more from your playing era, but they sensed the occasion, and they sensed and were able to cope with the pressure of playing for Australia from Victoria when there weren't as many big personalities, superstars of Australian sport, but superstars particularly here in Melbourne. To rise to the occasion and to perform like they did on so many occasions, I think it probably sets them apart. I think,
and that's intangible, isn't it?
Yeah,
Someone
it
who
is,
who just loves that moment and loves the stage, because as a professional athlete, the stage is intimidating because there's nowhere to hide, and some people embrace that, and some people get intimidated by it. And I don't think you can either teach. I think that's inherent. And the guys that we mentioned, they're all up for it and wanted to perform.
Absolutely. So, going and becoming a selector, you also were at the MCC, which would have been an amazing experience, I'm sure.
At Lords,
Yeah.
Two MCCs actually, Melbourne Cricket Club.
Yeah,
and
that's
also,
right.
And also Lords.
Yeah. Well, I may as well ask you, what was that like? Lords being your office, the place of work.
Amazing. So for a kicker from Footscray to be driving through the grey skates every day to go to work, incredible as a relatively young Australian as well. So that was a great 5 years. Really loved the time there. Amazing professional experience as well. But just to live in London for that time, as I said, to drive through the grey skates, just had to pinch myself. I had one rule for myself that, with so many meetings and stakeholder groups and committees, love a committee at Lords, but whenever I had to go through the long room, I always slowed my step just to take it in. That, this is special. This is real, and this is So for me, that feels still very much like home whenever I go back. Yeah, it's a great place to be.
Amazing place. But you then, so all that administrative roles, you had a dabble in hockey as well, and you had your own business. To go back into cricket to be a selector. Now, we all want to be a selector for Australia. We all think we're really good selectors when it comes to selecting the Australian team. But what was the...
I've heard some of your commentary actually on the stream, so I'm aware of that.
Marcus Harris, who wears number 14 for Victoria. But to actually do it, what was the lure back to say, you know what, I reckon I could do this?
Just a great challenge, I think. So I used to, when I was working at hockey, I'd sort of, I'd given away really any sort of, had a dabble at a couple of cricket roles, which hadn't worked out, but I thought, no, now it's time to do something else. And it's time to actually find out me outside of cricket, because I'd spent basically a lot of my life as either playing or administrating in cricket. So who was I without cricket? And it's a big world. It's a big world. So I was actually quite enjoying it. Loved working in hockey. But I'd sort of given my CV out a couple of places. I used to get a call probably once a month or so from recruiters, just to not necessarily say, here's a job we think you should apply for, but there's a job in cricket. You know the cricket world really well. Would you mind having a look at it for us? And if you're not interested, just tell us who we should maybe just be calling, just to see if they're interested. And so this job, this call came out of the blue, and don't know whether you know, but the Australian selectors roles come up. Trevor Holmes isn't going to, he's going to finish up after this contract. Don't know whether you know it's a full-time role these days, but would you mind having a look at it and then giving us your thoughts on who you think we should ring? So I'm reading this thing, and the more I read it, the more, geez, I might have something to offer for this. So, but then I had, well, what's my value proposition? Because clearly I'm not recency. I'm not a recent player. I haven't played 2020. I played plenty of limited overs cricket in various formats, but haven't played 2020. A long time out of the game since I've been a player. So what can I bring, which would add value to the mix? And it just seemed to me at the time, and they fell for it obviously. George, loved working with George, but George is a really intelligent guy. It just come out of playing, so he come straight from playing into selector's role. My I think point of difference was that I had a lot of time in administration, so systems, processes, governance, getting ideas to communicate through the chain of command. What is that is something that I'm really used to, writing papers, doing minutes and notes and whatever. So how are those things? Are those things relevant to this role? Because I think traditionally the selection has been around instinct, gut instinct, But now we're starting to get into data. We've got some terrific data analysts, people that work for us at the moment. So, what do you think of data? Well, I'm a scientist. I've got an applied science degree. I love data. It's part of the story. It's not all the story, but it's you can learn a lot if you're looking at that stuff. So that was the sort of the value proposition pitch from me, and I think hopefully I'm not only have some. I think I've got a pretty good eye for a cricketer, but also if I can help the other people on the panel, I've got to know George really well. Ronnie I've known for a long time as well, Andrew McDonald. So we get on well, but not too well that we're just groupthink and we just agree with each other for the hell of it. The thing about I love with George and both Ronnie is that they love a joust. They love to what if, what about this, what about that? Throw something in and just say, well, what about that? How do you think, well, if we do this, how are we going to fail? How would we prefer to fail? Because you are going to fail a lot of the time. So you can fail in a good way, you can fail in a bad way. So all those sort of discussions are really I think something that's really quite challenging, and I love that thinking, and also the communication, because again my experience where we started with this finding out for Victoria, that's the old days, and now I think communication to the states, to the players, to the people around is really crucial to what we do, and I love the way George goes about it, and hopefully I'll complement that.
Has it been as easy as you thought it would be, or has it been harder than you thought it would be, or has it been different to what you thought it'd be, selecting a team for Australia? Yeah,
it's certainly different because, again, my learned experience was that the dressing room's really tight and people, that's sacrosanct. That sacrosanct area. And so initially I was really uncomfortable in the dressing room because the selectors, the only time you saw a selector, they were coming down from the hospitality after having a few wines and in a suit and whatever, thinking, what's wrong? Who's going to get the chop now? But the fact of the matter is now that it's actually there are so many people around the team that and the environment, the culture is so different that you're welcomed in there because it's assumed that you're there to add value. And from a selection point of view, you're also being embedded in the team because we are. So basically, one of us, at least one, George or I, is with the team on most tours, pretty much every tour and every game. So we're around the team. But we're actually, I think the players like that too because you're seeing all their efforts. You're not just watching on a screen or from the grandstand and judging what happens by what happens out there. You're seeing all of their efforts and who they are as people as well. Because we pick the whole person. We don't just pick the skill. We're picking the whole person. And so the more information you can get about people, about the way they go about it, that adds substance and richness to the discussion. So it's different. It's different to what I thought it'd be, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it, working with some great people. There's some challenges. There always will be. But I hope I can add some value for a bit longer.
I always try and make these discussions about something that someone can learn listening to it from a Victorian cricket point of view. So whether it's someone that's trying to play for Australia or someone's trying to get into a junior representative team, from a selection perspective, you're talking about being embedded in the team. Is that because some of the times you're observing them as are you a good teammate? Are you a good person, as well as, hey, you're averaging 52, you've got to get in? Is that part of the role as a selector?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it is. So what is so it's that tension, as I said before when I started, it was dog eat dog. You're in there. Yes, you want the team to win, but if you do really well, and hold your place, number one, because you're going to get another match payment. Because you're not going to get it if you don't. So it was dog eat dog there. But yes, the guys are really keen to develop their own careers and be successful. But there's also a team. There's also a team ethos, and I think it still holds true that despite all those pressures about individuals and endorsements and contracts and all the rest of it, at the end of the day, you have a role to play in a team, in a series, in a match, and the way you give yourself to that is something that we rate really highly. Yeah. So it's not so much the case of righto, get a few not outs and boost up your average, but have you done the role for the team, even if it means you put yourself at risk and sacrifice a bit for the team's benefit at the time. That's something we value highly.
All right, that's a great lesson. Last question. I ask this to every guest. What does Victorian cricket mean to you when you look back? As an administrator, the boss, but also as a player of over 100 games for Victoria.
Yeah, it's had a massive effect on my world and my life, my relationships. I think still having those relationships is a great thing. The teams that I played for, the Victorians, particularly, you get to know each other really, really well. It's given me so many opportunities. It's massive opportunities for someone, a guy from Footscray who's not particularly talented, to then be able to not only have playing opportunities and play international cricket and see the world, but I think it's taught me, it and the people in Victorian cricket have taught me massive lessons that have basically helped me to transition to other parts of my life and made me a better person. So I think that is, I'm quite passionate about the fact that, as a professional cricketer, you also not only want to have a successful career, but you want to leave as a better person, a more rounded person, someone who can contribute back to the team itself and also have a better life afterwards. So I think Victorian cricket's done that, and I hope it continues to do that in this place that we now have everyone together and helping each other, and hopefully, that might sound as if a bit sort of kumbaya stuff, but no, I think that beyond all the stats, it's about people, and if the people can have an experience with Victoria and benefit from that, then go on to the rest of their lives, and that's a good thing.
I was driving here today, so excited about sitting down having a chat to you, and you've blown me away. It's been a fascinating discussion. I'm sure a lot of people in cricket would have enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much for being part of it all, and good luck selecting the World Cup final team. Hopefully we get there, and then the Australian summer ahead.
Thanks, Whitey. Thanks, Dylan. Really enjoyed it.
Tony Dodemaide, our guest on the Vic State Cricket Podcast. We'll do it again next time. We'll catch you then.